thank you everybody for coming. Again, we're so happy that you're here with us. We are Porto Charities, and I'm sure most of you know who we are, but we advocate for inclusive Catholic education and meaningful employment. And today we are bringing you one of our free educational webinars. Without much further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Susan and Monica, and they are both very, very knowledgeable and generous educators, and they have so much to share with us on this topic of social skills and emotional regulation. So I'm going to turn it over to them and let them tell you a little bit more about themselves. But again, thank you so much for coming and sharing this with us.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Carmen, for having us. I'm going to introduce myself, and then my partner in crime can do the same. My name is Monica McDonald. I am currently the Director of Learning Support Services at the Basilica School of St. Mary. This is my first year in the diocese. Prior to this, I worked for Fairfax County Public Schools for Child Find, which is the gateway for young students with disabilities coming into the county to get services. And before that, I lived in England for a few years where I was a school governor and worked to really improve services around the early years, is what they call it, and special education services at a small Catholic school there. And before that, I worked in several public school districts as an autism specialist. And I'm super honored to be with the diocese and with this wonderful school. We have a great team, and we're just really working to improve the services that were really already in place when I arrived. So, Susan?
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you this evening and to link up with Monica again. So I'm Director of Expanded Services at Bishop O'Connell High School. This is our 8th year, and it's just been an awesome experience being there and growing and learning more every year. I work with just a lot of excellent teachers, and really a lot of what's in this presentation from my side, or what I've learned, has been, this is not just like my knowledge. This is things that I'm learning with and from others, and just want to share it because it's made such a big difference in our practice at O'Connell. My background prior to that, I was local to this area and was a Fairfax County school teacher for 5 years, and then jumped over to Paul VI High School Options Program in its early years. I was just there for a couple of years, and then we started a family, and was home with my children for several years until involved a little bit in their and some special education endeavors in their elementary years, and then got back into teaching 8 years ago, so at O'Connell. So, and I have a sister with Down syndrome who was she and I overlapped at Paul VI in the options program for 1 year. I was a teacher and she was a student, so she's quite a bit younger than me. She's turned 37, but she's really was, the catalyst for me getting into this profession, and I'm grateful to her. And yeah, so that's my background.
All right. Thank you so much. So tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about social skills and emotional regulation, and how we sort of through our practice bring these very important facets of special education to our Catholic school settings. Okay, so our agenda for tonight is that we're going to talk about what social skills are and what they look like, why they need to be taught. We're going to talk about social skills and some of the challenges and strengths of the inclusive setting. Susan then is going to talk a little bit about emotional regulation and how she teaches that, and then some tools for teaching emotional regulation. And if anybody has any questions throughout, please, turn on your cameras and unmute and just give us any feedback or anything you're wanting clarification on. We're really happy to discuss all of it.
Like the pictures of Harry Potter.
Okay, so social skills are the ability to evaluate social situations. They also include the ability to recognize the feelings of others and the ability to select social behaviors that are appropriate for a given context. It also includes the ability to problem solve and regulate one's cognitions, feelings, and behavior. And with this last bullet, I always sort of think about two things that my mother used to tell me. She used to tell me, Monica, if I can see your face, so can everyone else. And she also used to tell me that I didn't need to say everything that popped into my head. And she was right, because as toddlers, as young children, we tend to do those things. We're not super inhibited, and we say whatever, pops into our brain. And then as we grow and as we develop, we start to regulate that ability to do that. And we might be sitting at a staff meeting thinking about things like, what I would say if I could say whatever I wanted. But we don't, as social beings, do that, because we have to preserve our relationships. We have to preserve our professional setting, and we have to be able to navigate those social waters. Okay, so social skills can also include some of those skills that are a little bit more developmental that we think about. Attending, so the ability to sit in a classroom, or the ability to sit at mass and be engaged. Waiting, so waiting for a turn, maybe waiting online somewhere, just listening and absorbing what's being said. The ability to read nonverbal cues, that's a big one. And recognizing the perceptions of others, that just because, a child or a student feels a certain way, that student needs to understand that not everybody feels the same way that they do. Okay, so the zones of regulation are related to our emotional regulation piece that is going to be covered a little bit later in our slides. But I put it up here because I really want to sort of describe how I'm feeling right now. So I would say that right now I am in the yellow zone, and you'll see that that is inclusive of frustration, being worried, feeling a little bit fidgety. And some of the reasons that I'm feeling that way right now is that this is, Susan reminded me that we have presented this multiple times before, and we were great. We really enjoyed it, and there was a lot of banter. There was a lot of back and forth with our participants. But in this setting, that is different. So tonight, I am a little bit anxious about that because, in the virtual setting, in the Zoom setting, it's a little bit different. I'm also really anxious about these slides and that they're going to continue on without a hitch. I'm nervous because I have 2 dogs as well, and my whole family is in and out all night, and I know at some point they're going to bark. And because of these things, because of these feelings that I'm having, it may impact some of the things that I say, and it may impact my ability to present. It's also a little bit later than I would normally be doing something like this. And so all those things can really contribute to how I present, right? So, and these situations are the same for all our children, all our students, and a lot of people. Unknowns can be difficult. Unpredictable situations can be really challenging. Not knowing what's going to be on a test or an exam can be challenging, and they can really influence where we are on these zones of regulation. And what Susan told me when we did this is that none of these are wrong or right. They are just, capturing the moment. So I'm a little bit yellow, and when it's Susan's turn, I'll probably be trending more green, although I will still be worried about the slides. Okay, so I just want to put out there, this question is, why do social skills require explicit instruction? Does anybody want to unmute and share? If not, I can go ahead and let you know what I think about it. Okay, I'm going to use the trick that Mrs. Choquette taught me, which was to count. I'm going to count to, I just kind of counted to 5 in my head and nobody responded. So I'm going to, oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Some people are able to learn social skills by just observing, but other people really need guidance, just like some people are faster readers than others, and some people are faster at math than others. Some people pick up social skills naturally, and some of them do not. And so, and especially I think at school, in a situation where people are at different levels and where there's different personalities and different kinds of backgrounds for everybody, even if whether it's private school, public school, or any kind of school, the kids are going to have a different understanding of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and how to resolve problems, and how to best work together in situations and do teamwork. And I mean, even as an adult, sometimes I struggle with this stuff.
Yes, I appreciate you sharing that. Yes. And isn't that sort of one of the, challenges of working as educators in inclusive settings, is that I think in some cases there, maybe earlier on, there was the assumption that if we just kind of plopped children into these general ed settings with their peers, that they would just absorb the skills that they needed to. And that's just not always the case. So social skills do require explicit instruction so that we're not relying on assumptions, and that we're strategically and purposefully teaching them the skills to navigate life's pathways. And social skills evolve, right, as children age. So when we talk about, my specialty was always very young children. So when I was working with a 3-year-old with, who was neurodiverse, we would work on telling a student no, telling a peer no, instead of grabbing a toy back from them that they've taken, or saying, can I have a turn? Or just generally how to put their belongings away. That those are all skills that needed instruction. And now as kids get older, for example, my daughter is 13 and she was horrified when I went to Starbucks with her a few weeks ago. She's like, what are you doing? Well, I didn't know how I was supposed to order and that I was supposed to wait in a certain place. And these are things that, in order for our children and adults and everyone to survive in a social world, the skills have to be taught explicitly. So now I am actually going to ask if people would participate by either, I don't know, Susan, can you monitor the chat? Because I'm afraid to leave the slides. So we would like to do, if everybody's familiar with the phrase task analysis, a task analysis is when we take a skill and we break it down into several discrete steps. So for example, setting the table, and I'll cover this one first, is, the child has to, set the table. Well, first they have to know how many people are going to be sitting at the table. They have to get the utensils. They have to know what's being served for the meal. They might need a spoon. They might need all three. Who knows what they need? They might need serving pieces. So there's a lot of steps to that, right? Folding the napkins, putting the cutlery out. And, in some ways we might have to make that skill a little bit more structured by, providing a placemat with images on it so they know placement of things. So these are just some seemingly simple tasks that I thought we could just quickly do a task analysis of. So why don't we skip to handing back homework? So if everybody could just kind of throw up in the chat, and we'll see how this goes. If not, we'll just come off mute and everybody can just throw some things out there for the next one, the skills that are involved in handing back homework. And Susan, can you see the chat?
I've got it open.
Okay. Oh, I can open it too. I'm just afraid to click anything. Okay. Mm-hmm. Right. So know the names of students in the class, right? They have to be able to read names, and those are two separate skills, right?
Reading people's names.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Walking. Mm-hmm. Right. So navigating pathways of a classroom is not just walking. And some classrooms have, bins on the floor, or the desks are close together. Yes. Navigating the classroom. to the correct desk. Right. And you have to have some level of fine motor skills, right? So to be able to, pinch the paper or separate them or however that's going to happen. So handing back homework, that's been graded, and I'm probably not
teased.
right. Knowing who's not there, a student who might be a little bit more rigid in their behavior could walk around for 10 minutes looking for a student who's not there. Right. So these are things that children have to be able, we all have to know how to navigate before we just assume that they know how to do certain things. So let's skip down to, grocery shopping during our training became a little unwieldy, but maybe getting lunch in the cafeteria. If everybody could just throw up a few things that people have to know to be able to do that.
Well,
waiting in line. That's a big one. And that's so hard for some of our students. Waiting in line without touching everything, without touching the person in front of you.
knowing the cafeteria routines and being mindful of others near and around them.
Right. So being able to regulate your own, sensory system, or, having that proprioceptive, not kind of being all over the place. Yeah, this is great. Thank you for participating, everyone. All right. So, and my personal favorite was ordering in person at Starbucks, which is just like a slippery slope, I think, of everything that you have to be able to do that. All while not embarrassing my teenager. So I'll just throw out there, you have to know all the different, you have to know the sizes, you have to know what, right, you have to be able to carry a tray, you have to know what grande, venti, and what's the other one? I can't even think about it. All those different sizes, what they mean. I still go up and sometimes ask for the medium one. Yes, tall, right. It's so unwieldy. The different types of milks, I think you have to know. Apparently my daughter tells me you're supposed to know that you should ask for light ice or you're gonna not get enough drink. How to pay, right? Being able to make a choice. So when I worked with preschoolers, one of the IEP goals that we almost always put on for very young children was making a choice from a field of 3. So just being able to know what you want, recognizing sort of, I think I feel like this today. Right. Ordering and which one is waiting for your drink, right? And being able to make, knowing that you're getting the correct change if you're not paying with the app or with a card. So it's these things that we sometimes tell our students to do. It's just not that easy for them, right? So one of the things that I used to really correct teachers was saying was, I would say, stop telling them to use their words because they don't know what words. If they knew the words and how to stop something or how to access something or how to request or label something, they would do it, right? Because using words is the fastest way to do it. It's faster than trying to flip through for a picture icon. It's faster than going through, an app, a communication app on the iPad. So let's try not to say that, I would tell my teachers, because if they knew the words, they would say it because it's fast. It's the fastest way to do it. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm trying to switch. There we go.
So what do you suggest instead of saying use your words? Because I've been using that phrase, and I have a son with autism.
Yep.
I've been using that phrase since he was 2.
So the alternative to that is saying, if you know what he wants. So for example, your son, if he's, open the fridge and is looking through the fridge, you might say, tell me I'm hungry, or tell me I'm thirsty, or, there's other ways, but sometimes, and that's my personal preference, right? I do not have a child with autism, but I have worked with many, but using your words is sometimes just for when I was working with very young children was just very, it was too broad. It wasn't always, they just didn't know what it meant when I said that to them. But you can just give them the exact language if you know what they want, which isn't always the case, right?
Okay, so I currently am an instructional assistant.
Great.
And work particularly, I work in several different classrooms, and one of them has a boy he's in a normal classroom, he's I'm not going to say all the stuff, but one of the things is he's got high behavior, and once the behavior starts, he starts to shut down. He
Mhm.
doesn't have autism. He's got some other emotional stuff going on.
Mhm.
So then this is a second grade. So once he starts to shut down, it's really hard to get him to come back. And so I'm here because I'm trying to figure out how to help him
Mhm.
get to the point where he's not melting down so that we can keep him.
No, I understand. So I think too, and what you'll see later on, and what I'm hearing without really knowing the case, so forgive me if I missed the mark on this. But Susan is going to show you, how this visual, and it can really be modified so that all those words are not on it, right? So you could really, the key with something like that is to teach the child the skills when he's not agitated, right? So really helping him, like when he's in a calm state, when he's engaged in the learning, and showing him the coping skills before that happens. And then you would sort of develop a cue or a visual or something that then when that's presented to him, when he is in the heightened state, he can recall that and remember that, something will cue him to remember that he did it when he was a little bit more calm, and it'll become a little bit more rote. And with some of these emotional regulation visuals that you're going to see, you could cut the words right off of that and make it, and just, the red looks like, angry, or the yellow looks worried, or whatever it is. And so then he might be able to point to how he's feeling, and then you can sort of suss out what the issue is, right?
Okay. A lot of his stuff has to do with A, transition, and B, not wanting to stay in preferred activities instead of going to.
I mean, I feel him. I feel him.
I
I really
him
do.
Too.
I really do.
But you can't run around the classroom and
Correct.
and hit people and throw things because
correct.
your preferred activity is over.
And so part of that is practicing, like, before he's upset, right? So practicing it maybe just with one or two children, and maybe moving from, the one more preferred activity to another preferred activity, but maybe is, not as preferred as the one he's leaving. But so, so some of that is practicing it before, and that's hard, right? Because, the one thing I've understood really more than anything this year is that as an administrator, I can't create the one thing that everybody needs more of, which is time in the day, right? And so, and that was hard for me to face that fact. But that, I'm telling you, we'll just practice it at a time when he's not agitated. But my goodness, there's so much that we have to cover, right? And so much to move through in the day. Go ahead. Oh, Susan, yes, please.
Oh, I was just going to say that it'll be interesting to see what follow through the rest of what you have to share here, Monica, and as we go through some of the other emotional regulation tools, and then we can revisit at the end to see, what questions remain.
That's great. Yeah. So here I just have up on this slide is just sort of a cycle for teaching social skills. And the example that I like to use is one, it's really about my own children, and because I know that one well, but you could really apply this to almost anything. So you would want to activate background knowledge. So what I usually tell people is, like, for example, when I'm on my way with my children who are 13 and 11, and I still do this with them, on my way to a family event where they're going to see more like extended family, people they haven't seen in a while. So in the car, I might say to them, oh, remember, you're going to see, we're going to see Aunt Eileen. And don't you remember, she's a teacher. You can ask her about her golden doodle, Daisy. And she, they moved to Fairfax City a couple months ago. We can ask them about that. And remember, they have John and Nora are their children. And So, and then, the concrete knowledge of identifying all those steps. So then I might say, so, we are going to go in, we'll have to hang up our coats, yada, yada, and just sort of walk them through it, modeling the steps. That would look different in a classroom. So if you were teaching a child, for example, how to play a board game, because you were going to be engaging them in a small social skills group, you might model those steps. And that's also what I've just sort of referenced with that question, right? That you would practice those steps outside of that situation where it's a little bit more stressful and more real life. So you would model the steps, then practice the skill, repetition. Remember, these kids learn, any student learns well with a lot of practice, but particularly some kids who do have disabilities learn best by just practicing over and over again. And then you transfer and start to generalize. So you go into that real world setting. Maybe it's a time when you can go into the cafeteria when it's fewer people, right? You can go, we have a student that I know, one of our instructional assistants brings her into the cafeteria to look at what is for lunch before any other children are in there. Now she may be doing that so she can concentrate or focus on looking at the thing, looking at the food without distraction, or just maybe it's a little bit easier for her with fewer people. So you can sort of do that in baby steps. You could go to a grocery store or a Starbucks. Well, Starbucks wouldn't be early in the day, but any place where it might, during a time when it might be less crowded, something like that. And then we just go back again. So then we have another skill and we activate the background knowledge. So this is really just a rough sort of steps on how I like to teach new social skills. Okay. Okay. So some of the challenges for teaching social skills in the inclusive setting are that rules can sometimes be clear. So rules and expectations may not always be evident or obvious. So sometimes, in a classroom, in a small group setting, where it might just be, a special education classroom or like a little resource room, the rules might be posted somewhere, or the routines might be so ingrained. The student comes in same time every day, runs through the steps, just in a rote way where, the steps don't have to be, there doesn't have to be any more instruction delivered on the steps. But then you're moving it into that larger classroom where, there's more stimuli on the walls and there's more people and more noise. So all that can be really difficult for a student. You have in a classroom, in a general ed classroom, certainly there's a lot of developmental variation. So it's hard to meet the needs of so many students, or your student may be really high in some areas and low in others, as it relates to their peers. And again, time constraints. There's never enough time. So, we may have in the plan book, yeah, we're gonna do a Kahoot. Okay, yeah, it's gonna be great. We're gonna do one of those Kahoots where we all, take out our devices but if the student has never used a Kahoot and the other students are like, oh yeah, we've never done it, but oh yeah, we see it's really obvious, all those answers are there. We see there's a correct answer. We hit that correct answer, and your other student who really needs a little bit more explicit instruction around those activities is like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. So those are some of our challenges. Does anybody else have any other challenges? I'm sure there are that you can think of, either in a classroom setting or another, real world setting. Okay.
Oh, I was just going to add, I think one challenge in the inclusive setting is just variation, like how often things are changing. So there's so many unpredictable things that come with each day in the schedule that it's hard to always plan and prepare for them.
Yes, we saw that during Lent. There was a lot of activities during Lent, and it made the day different. It made all the days different. And it was lovely and beautiful, but it still made all the days a little bit different than they were outside of that time of year. Okie dokie. Okay. So where do you start? So as teachers, but really in any setting, review your rules for observable behaviors. So, I always liked rules that I could picture in my head. So be respectful. Definitely a good rule. great, but what does that look like, particularly to a student who is neurodiverse, right? They don't know, might not know what that means. Okay, so it might, instead you might write, you know, keep hands to self, or, you know, quiet, mouth closed when teacher is talking. Okay, so we want to make sure behaviors that we want to see are observable. You can model in your own classroom or in any setting pro-social behaviors. So you might narrate or what you're doing if you're playing a board game, or if you're, you know, thinking to yourself, you're fidgety, and you can say that out loud. Oh, I hate waiting. I'm fidgety, but I'm not going to touch anything else while I'm waiting my turn. You can narrate those types of things in the line at the cafeteria or in the grocery store. All those things. You can also model perspective taking. I can see that his face looks sad, so I'm gonna leave him alone until his face looks happier. Okay, things like that. I know that sounds really basic, but these are things that really do require instruction. One of the things that I really always recommend to families with whom I've worked, and other teachers, is to build in moments of unpredictability, because those can be the most difficult to navigate. So if you have a schedule that's fairly consistent, just, you know, throw something else in there. You can even, if you're using schedule icons or something digital that's posted, you can just put a little symbol. And like I used to put a star, and people would say, what's the star? And I'd say, oh, you're gonna find out, like, it's okay. And so that really teaches them almost to feel that anxiety a little bit, but to try and manage it. And we'll learn ways to manage it a little bit later when we talk about more in depth about emotional regulation. And then your classroom organization. Classrooms and tasks and things in the classroom. When you walk in, you know, children should understand and know exactly what needs to happen where. For example, so probably a lot of us, I have, when I walk into my house, I have probably 12 hooks. There is no question what goes on those hooks. It's my kids' coats and their backpacks, and anybody who comes in the house knows that coats go on, their coat can go on the hook. I don't have to say, I'll take your coat. I can, but I can just pop it on the hook, right? So there's ways to structure the environment so that students, children will know what goes where and what happens next, okay? Okie dokie. So this is a sort of a varied version of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I just finished a grad degree program, and Maslow is still, you know, really present in a lot of our educational pedagogy and, you know, philosophies and strategies for working with children. So you'll see that right in the middle there are social needs. And you'll see right below that are safety needs. So those two kind of go together. So safety needs include not only just like physical safety, you know, protection from getting hurt, all those things, but they also include stability and predictability, and structure and order. So, and limits. It requires limits, and that's okay to have limits. Also, our social needs are right above that. So friendship, love, belonging, affiliation, so knowing that you belong to a group. So all these things, they really do impact the way children and adults learn and sort of learn to navigate their environment. So I just like to pop that up there because Maslow is one of my favorites. And I think now we are on to emotional regulation, but I do want to just see if anybody has any questions specifically about social skills and teaching social skills. All right. Well, thank you for oh, go ahead.
Sorry, it's not so much a question, it's more of a comment. Like, I just really appreciate how you broke down that, like, these skills need to be taught, and like there's specific things that if, you know, the kids don't have the words, you know, we need to give it to them. And I just really appreciate you bringing that out. So thank you. I'm excited for part 2.
Thank you for the feedback. And I will leave it with Susan. I'm going to mute, but I will just tell me when I need to move the slide if I haven't done it yet.
Okay, great. And anybody that wants to turn their camera on, I love seeing faces. It helps me. But if not, that's fine too. Okay, so I'm going to begin talking about teaching emotional regulation, and just beginning with why it's important. So our emotions go with us everywhere, right? We don't go anywhere without our emotions. They change frequently, related to the environment and circumstances. Understanding our emotions is part of self-awareness, and this is just so important. I think there are plenty of adults, right, that we often lack the self-awareness of, like, what are we actually feeling right now? Or maybe it's so many different things that we're feeling. So this is such a life skill to teach our young ones how to identify their own emotions. Regulating emotions is essential for social success. And definitely we all want our students or children to be successful socially. I think it's, that's a huge part of fulfillment in life, to find that social success. We want to help equip them in that area. And regulating emotions is essential for success in learning. And we'll talk a little bit later about how it's a big part of self-determination. Just, it's going to really empower all of our students from our young ones at whatever age, just to be more in charge of themselves. The next slide. Can you switch to the next slide, Monica? Thank you. Okay, so we've got the tricky thing here because Monica's sharing the screen, so I can't monitor it. So I just wanted to just point this out. I always think it's helpful to just know that what we're doing is based on research. So this is just a little snap screenshot of the Iris Peabody Center through Vanderbilt University and their module on understanding challenging behavior. So if you're not aware of the Iris Peabody Center, it's great tools for teachers and a lot of things that you can go through at your own pace, different modules. So here, it breaks it down clearly of that this is just research-based practice to focus on social and emotional skills, which is exactly what this presentation is about. So, and I just put little arrows on the part that we're covering today. So now on to the next slide. All right, so when we're teaching, I've got to keep on moving my pictures around here. When we're teaching emotions to students, it's really important to start doing it. It's hard often to identify them in themselves. And so we find it more successful to begin by teaching them to identify the emotions in others, right? So if you're watching a cartoon, it's easier to identify the emotions outside of yourself before identifying them within yourself. So we do a lot of education using pictures or little video clips or role plays so that it's not so personal, right? So they can see the emotion outside of themselves and learn how to identify it. And we use this graphic through zones of regulation. So you can find that online. They've got a lot of really good graphics to use. This one that I've pictured here is one. They have another one that they've got several that could work at different developmental ages that might be more appropriate at different ages. So they learn that these zones are just categorizing different emotions that humans feel. We talk about Jesus, and God, and that God, we're made in the image of God. And so we have these emotions. They are God made, God ordained, and that Jesus had emotions. So all of our emotions are part of us, and our emotions are not good or bad. It's what we do with our emotions, right? So we do get into wrong responses and right responses. But when we begin talking about them, we want them to just understand that, just look at their emotions as neutral, so they don't feel like they have to identify a certain one. And we'll look at the zones graphic a little bit more clearly on a bigger screen in a moment. So an example is this picture when we're teaching students to look at it in another. So we've got the picture of the girl, and we can ask them, what happened? So she dropped her ice cream cone. What's the feeling? Well, she looks sad. So I don't begin with why questions ever. We find that why is a hard WH question, right? What is much easier? So even with our students at the high school level, when we're working with students with intellectual or developmental disabilities, going to the what caused or what happened to bring that feeling, it's an easier question for them to answer. Why is a little bit abstract and out there. Okay, the next slide. All right, so tips for practice. So teachers incorporate the use of zones, we just call it zones, with zones of regulation, to describe personal feelings regularly. So we began this a couple years ago. It was really post-COVID, and I think coming back, our whole world realized that everybody's got a lot of emotional needs, and that it was essential as we just adapted back to kind of school back with everybody in place and back to normal, and, you know, masks, not masks, whatever. There were so many things going on. It just became really clear that we needed to start implementing at our high school some real explicit instruction of social skills and equipping our students with understanding their emotions and tools for regulating their emotions. So this is when we began using zones just a few years ago. And as teachers, we've really enjoyed it ourselves. So we have the zones graphics up and available in all of our classroom spaces. We teach our mentors how to use it, and they have little graphics with them when they're in different inclusive class settings. So we try to just have everybody know these zones and kind of the prompts of how we use them. But we begin as teachers by modeling for our students, normalizing emotions as part of routine experience. So as things happen during the day, we will readily grab that graphic off the wall and say, you know, there was a schedule change today. I'm really feeling, you know, in the yellow zone. I'm a little worried about, you know, X, Y, or Z, or I'm frustrated. Just using it, making it normal that we have emotions, that our emotions are changing, and that our emotions are linked to things that are happening around us. So that's been helpful and fun, and then we keep those visuals ready and handy. And just having that common language for our whole team of teachers and for our mentors has been really helpful, and for our students as well. So frequent modeling, common language are the keys there. The next slide. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I've got 3, you know, case studies. I've changed the names of the students, so I'm not divulging anything, but these are just some situations that have happened with 3 students. And I'm just going to walk us through kind of how to handle these, looking at through the lenses teaching emotional regulation. So I'll begin. I'm just going to read through these 3 case studies. The first one is a boy named Alex. He's a student with intellectual disability, and he's known for his athleticism, yet he frequently falls down at school or gets hurt during the day. On this occasion, he tripped in the hallway on his way to first period. So we're going to return to this and take this apart a little bit more. The next case study is Maggie. She's a student with intellectual disability. She has moments of unexpected negativity. She will fold her arms, refuse to move, and say negative things repeatedly. On this occasion, she was found in the hallway, arms folded, saying, "I am stupid," and refusing to enter her class. The next situation is Mark, and he's a young man on the autism spectrum, and he's having laughing episodes in class while rocking his body. And the laughing episodes are boisterous and prolonged, so they've become disruptive. And on this particular day, he began to rock and laugh in his US history class as his teacher began the new topic of Reconstruction. All right, next slide. Okay, so those are all behavior, right? So we would look at all those things as some unexpected behavior, and we're faced with how to handle them if we're the teacher or the parent and these things arise. So as special educators, you know, we've been taught to see behavior as a form of expressive communication, and it most certainly is. And so we also become kind of adept in becoming sleuths, right? We want to determine what's the function of the behavior. So if it's communication, what are they communicating? So this is just a slide from our peer mentor training, and I try to also help our mentors to understand that students' behavior is communication. And if we're going to respond to them, it helps to understand what they're communicating. And this is just, there's, there's a lot of functions of behavior, but these are 4 functions of behavior, just some categories as a way to think about it. So gaining attention, gaining a reward or getting out of something, a sensory need, and expressing emotion. And obviously expressing emotion can go across all of them. So then, some responses to all of those are listed on the side. And as teachers in particular, I think when things come up, we're always, we'll get together as a team and everybody's sort of thinking it, we're thinking of what happened before, what's currently happening, and what's their behavior. So you're trying to analyze the behavior and as an outsider, determine what are they communicating. So we'll move on, then returning to the next slide. And we're going to look at those case studies again with a closer look. And now this is through the educator's eye, trying to decide what's happening here. So let's see what I already know. I'm thinking back to Alex, and I think, so he's the one, his situation was that he's tripping in the hallway and seems to be getting hurt. So I know he loves his peers and he wants their attention and care. So that's something I know about him. I know that sometimes he is confused or overwhelmed by moments of the day or by academic demands of the classroom. So I'm thinking maybe he's trying to get attention or avoidance. And the tripping, right? I've made it clear, like he's super athletic and he's really coordinated. So we weren't thinking that this tripping's legit. It's happening so often where he's having these issues of falling down that it seems to be, something's up. All right. So then we're looking at Maggie again through the educator's eyes, and we're thinking, so Maggie's negativity is often linked to unexpected moments in her day. So that could be just events that come up, absences of a mentor, correction by a teacher, and her negativity brings attention and encouragement by her peers to be happy. So looking at it, I might think she's trying to get attention or, expressing emotion. And then Mark, so he's the one that's laughing and rocking in his history class. Well, I know that he rocks to self-soothe, and that rocking is, vestibular movement for the vestibular sensory system, right? So that's a self-soothing behavior. I know that when he's confused or uncomfortable or bored, lately he's begun to laugh, but uncontrollably is still kind of stumping us. So I'm thinking he's got pent-up emotion, and we know that it's a sensory need there with the rocking. So next slide. Okay, so now we're back to zones, and you can see it a little bit more clearly here. So why it's so important to teach them what zone they're in. So like I've said, we've done this instruction in the classroom where they're watching video clips and they're seeing pictures and they're doing role play. So they're having explicit instruction about these zones, about these emotions, lots of practice just identifying emotions. And our prompt that we use is just, what's the feeling, right? Just keeping it simple. So seeing something, a little video clip play out and being able to identify what the feeling. And if they're in a group of instruction, it's really great for, them multiple students to respond. They don't always have the same response, and we can learn how they see things differently. Maybe we'll have them get up and role play. So they are getting really familiar with just going through these zones. We're pulling out this graphic so often that they can pretty quickly zero in on these different colors and identify what zone they're in. So that's the magic of teaching this. And one thing that's really important is we have seen as we teach this, how often students want to be in the green zone. So if you ask them, what zone are you in? They might, we've got a few that will always say, I'm green zone, I'm calm, I'm happy, I'm calm, I'm happy. So we do identify that the green zone is the optimal zone for the classroom, and it's what we would call expected behavior for the classroom for learning. But the green zone is not expected behavior everywhere, right? So if they're walking to a high school pep rally and the halls are crowded and everybody's excited, and athletes are running down the hallway going to meet their teams, it wouldn't be expected for green zone to be everywhere. It's really a lot more yellow and maybe even red, right? So there's big emotion happening at different time that would be expected. So it really is important for them to understand the difference of what's expected, and that green is not always good, right? If they came to school on a Monday and their dog died over the weekend, we certainly don't want them in the green zone. We would expect them to be in the blue zone and to be able to express that sadness. So those are things that we go over and over and over again, really working to teach them so they understand how to use this graphic effectively. So back to the next slide. So remember, we're going to like what happened and what's the feeling. So now, knowing that we've taught students how to use this graphic, they're learning how to identify what their feeling is. We're going to now take these same scenarios and apply the students being able to talk about their own feeling. So what I want to point out for a moment here is why this is so important. So as teachers, when I leave the student out of it, when I haven't taught them how to identify their emotions and really get their perspective and equipped them with the tools to express what's going on inside, they're left with just me or just the teacher around our perception of their reality. But I'm not, we're not the student, or we're not the child. We can't totally see everything that they're seeing, and we're not feeling what they're feeling. So, and we can misdiagnose, and I misdiagnose on a regular basis because I'm just going with what I see and what I know and what, I might have a preconceived notion of that student. And then I get so used to seeing certain things, I might over apply a certain, behavior that he has, and the reason that I think the child's expressing or showing that behavior to situations, and I get it wrong. So that's key. And the one of the main things I wanted to emphasize here, that we can't just rely on ourselves when we're helping our students and trying to help them through behavior challenges. So next slide. All right. So now Alex tripped. So we're applying the zones of regulation and asking the student, what's the feeling? So once it's clear that he's not hurt, right? So I don't just automatically assume that this student is not hurt if he's tripped in the hallway. So once it's clear he's not hurt, a teacher asks, Alex, what's the feeling? And he says, worried. And with Maggie, a teacher asks Maggie what she is feeling and prompts her with the zones chart. So it's very important that she sees that visual cue, and she points right to blue and says, sad. We get to Mark, and quietly the teacher pulls him out of the classroom to talk to him in privacy. We wouldn't want to embarrass him in front of his peers, and asks him, we don't need that zones chart right in front of him. He's familiar with it. He's got it pictured right up here, and ask him, what's the feeling? And he says, bored and excited. So interesting. He's got a couple things going on there. We'll get to that in a second. All right. So we've named the feelings. Now what? All right. That's only part way. They need to know what to do once they can identify their feelings. And I got ahead of myself before talking about expected and unexpected behavior. But the students are taught to identify responses and feelings as either expected or unexpected. And this is through scenarios that are outside of themselves. So these video clips, the images, the video modeling, the role play is really, really important and fun, right? Role play is fun. The students are also taught to identify the size of the problem. And that's also important. And at the end, I'll just share my screen and show you a graphic that we've gotten from another resource called Everyday Speech. That's an awesome, awesome resource. But that helps them look at the size of the problem, evaluate the size of the problem, and then the size of their response, and seeing if they match. And it's just been gold having this tool. And then we can help them problem solve, ask them if they can solve the problem or if they help is needed. So we'll continue back to the next one. And then we're going to teach them strategies to regulate their behavior. And this has also been key, really modeling and practicing breathing. So I'm sure we all know about like lots of different mindfulness strategies, but they really work. They do help. It helps if we model them and use them ourselves, which can be hard, but so important. But that breathing, and we usually teach like 3 deep breaths and show them, that belly breathing. And we use some graphics and practice, again, not in the moment when there's like an emotional fight or there's a behavioral situation, but we're in the classroom, we're doing that explicit teaching. We'll teach them, one person likes the graphic of smell the flowers, blow out the candles. So it's a 2-picture graphic. So if we have to prompt her to breathe, we'll say, smell the flowers, blow out the candles. Another one doesn't want to have anything to do with that, but might just like to, touch his stomach, breathe in, blow out, and feel that breath on his finger. A student has a hard time blowing just because of the oral motor, that it takes to blow. So we'll even just kind of make a sound, like just a little humming sound or something to be blowing out that air.
For younger kids, you can do like those sensory, like those boxes of beans, rice, without it like, trying to contain it so it doesn't get all over. But Susan, I just wanted to back to that one question we had at the beginning about the student. And so the sequence of steps, the progression of moving through this, I think, does that make now sense, a little bit more sense for that child you were, I don't know who it was, but who was having challenges around transitioning from preferred activities to then non-preferred activities?
Yes, a lot of this stuff is things. Some of it is stuff we've been working on, but I can see a lot of things that we could improve on.
Right. And like these strategies that Susan is mentioning here, that they might look completely different for any child. These are just a few examples. And these are things obviously in the classroom. You can have those glitter jars. They're really easy. Sometimes kids like a walk. Sometimes it's, it could be anything. It could be so idiosyncratic, just like what this one child likes, what they're comforted by. And so even like teaching how to access it, right? So like, we're going to keep it over there. So I think just moving through these last few slides, I was thinking about this child that you discussed.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you, Monica.
Sure. Thank you.
I think that's so important. So there are just some images here of things that can be used for calming strategies. There's so many things, so many different sensory tools. There's like little pillows that you can rub, and they show one color one way, and then you rub them back and they show a different color another way, with like this little sequins or fur or something. Just lots of different things that are visual and tactile that are effective. I think narrating just slowly, like not too many words, but sometimes narrating what you see happening for the student can be helpful if they're not totally understanding their response and their reality, right? So sometimes, just talking about what's happening, like the room's getting really crowded. There are too many people here. This is feeling overwhelming. We're going to take a step aside here where it's quiet. So I've named, it's overwhelming. It's too loud. Like you're going to freak out in a second if we don't get out of here, but we can just help give some words to what's happening. And that is helpful too. I also wanted to just go back to the zones. Sometimes when we're in the moment and dealing with somebody who is having, a clear emotion, and there's, a behavior issue occurring, and I say, what's the feeling? And they might point to one, and it's clear it's inaccurate. And I can see it on their face, right? Like, and they're like, I'm green, and I'll say, well, you're saying you're calm and happy, but your face is telling me something different. Your face, I'm going to show you what your face looks like. And then I'll, try to just show them, not to make fun of them in any way, but just to kind of give them an idea. Like, I'm seeing this on your face. Your face looks more like this picture here. It looks, upset or angry, just so that they can see, that it's not matching, and that helps as well. It takes a while. So I'm jumping ahead, obviously, to a lot of instruction that's happened and showing how students are implementing it. And I'm also showing you that it's high school students, my examples, who are implementing these strategies. So our next slide, we'll go back. So just returning to the case study. After consistent direct instruction about emotional zones, Alex is now able to identify his emotion when prompted. So he tells us he's worried. The teacher may identify him to identify the source of worry. Again, I'm not going to say why are you worried. I'm saying what makes you worried. My mentors are out today, and this makes so much sense for this student that's really at the high school level, or I think anywhere. Relationships are a big part of structure. So when you remove certain relationships that are expected around them each day, it feels like a loss of structure, and it can feel like, the floor fell out. And then identify a strategy to implement to respond and regulate emotion. So he's learned, this is something I need to tell a teacher and ask for help. And then in the moment, he's going to breathe. And then the next one, we're turning to Maggie. So after consistent instruction, Maggie is beginning to identify her emotion. It should say her, not his, when prompted. So she tells us sad. And the teacher may help her identify the source of her sadness. So the teacher told her, she's able to say that the teacher told her to do work and stop fidgeting with her hair. So this student gets kind of stuck on like her hair and her bangs, and she wants to play with it all the time. And she's very sensitive. So somebody just redirecting her to do the task just can feel sort of crushing. So it was just that just shut her down. And then she just went into this negative speech. And to identify strategy to implement. So for her, learning to breathe when she's upset, and then positive self-talk. And that's like a whole nother set of lessons and lessons and lessons, teaching them some skills of saying different things to themselves to work through difficulties. And the final one, Mark is beginning to identify his emotion when prompted. So he was pretty good at identifying two emotions going on at once. And the teacher helps him to identify the source. So he said he was bored by instruction. They were starting reconstruction, and we can all remember that's a little bit, less exciting than the Civil War. And the big thing is that he's thinking of girls. So we found out that the laughter is this fellow is thinking of girls, and he's thinking of them all the time. And it is overwhelming, and it's coming out, right? It's just coming out in laughter. So that just tipped us off that we're working on a whole new set of strategies with him to assist him in that. But it was really helpful for him to be able to identify and share that's what was going on and stuck in his mind. And then to identify a strategy is breathing, reading the room, and he's taking little breaks, or even stopping to sip water will help him to stop laughing. So just finally, again, it's just huge to teach these skills, helping the students with self-awareness, self-advocacy, and social success. So thank you. Oh, I'm going to share the screen really fast just to show that size of the problem. So here's the size of the problem scale that we teach them. And again, there's all kinds of like little videos and work to go through teaching this, but they can learn if it's very small. And they're not going to have very big ones in school. Like very big is, they learn it's like a catastrophe, like an earthquake or something like that. So that they're mainly dealing with just small, medium, or big problems. And once they learn how to use this scale, they can identify if it's a problem they can solve themselves or they need help with. And when we talk about small, we talk about like, oh, I had a pen and I dropped it on the floor, and then we'll act out like, just too big of a reaction for something so small when they can reach down and pick it up. And this has, again, just been a huge, it's really helped a lot of students just be successful in being able to say that they have a small problem and that their reaction's too big, and they're working to choose a new reaction. So these visual cues, I just think, visual cues all the way for everything that we do, but visual cues for helping teach emotions and for us utilizing them and modeling always throughout every day, even when we're not doing the explicit lessons, is a key to success. Let's stop sharing. There we go. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Yeah, and anybody who's ready, like to just pop on screen, we'd love to see you and, help facilitate this conversation. But yeah, thank you so much for this topic. And I really just feel like it's so helpful to just have the color coding and to see like where that's at. And I was wondering, is there like are there any materials that you recommend to like continue learning about this? Like, where is the best way to kind of like learn more?
For the emotional regulation piece, for teaching that, I think zones of regulation is widely used in special education settings. I think one thing that I wanted to point out with the beauty of using it inclusively, like in our inclusive classrooms, is all students will benefit from it and all teachers will benefit from it. So having that common language in a classroom where, if it's a second grade classroom to a 12th grade classroom, what zone are you in? I mean, everybody's in different zones all the time, and being able to kind of see that and then regulate is huge and helpful for everyone. And Zones has stuff on Teacher Pay Teachers. They have, they have a book, they have free resources that you can get online without, paying. They've got a lot of free graphics that you can use. They have a book that you can read through just kind of about teaching it that's sold, I think for, like $30 or something. And then the Everyday Speech is an annual subscription, but you can get some of the videos that they have for free. And again, it's an excellent resource that has leveled videos from beginner to advanced and features children doing video modeling all the way up to teenagers. So it has a very broad sweep.
I think for social skills, there's so many tools out there, but what I always relied so heavily on for social skills instruction was going back to basics about child development, and just knowing like what kids should be doing when, and sort of understanding again that we can't assume that when we say something, go do this, that the kids know how to do it. So I think for that, you really want to go back to basics and understand your child development, know your age levels, understand what peers in that, in the grade level, or the more, what we would call the more typically developing peers are doing, and trying to understand how you can meet then the child who is maybe not at age level where they are, and how they can access those activities. But there are lots of tools and books out there that are great, and I could compile a list if that would be helpful at some point.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Awesome. Does anybody have any like scenarios? We have a little bit of time before we close. Does anybody have any specific scenarios that maybe you'd want to bring up? Like, what's the best direction? I mean, obviously we're not gonna have time to like solve it here, but we might be able to point you in the right direction.
I just wanted to say that I really appreciated the way when you were presenting those different case scenarios, how you said that it was important to include the student and not try to think from my own point of view what I think there is going on with them. Because I have seen, having been in the education setting for a long time, I have seen a lot of teachers and staff say, oh, well, this student is just trying to get attention, so this is what we need to do. And the student doesn't get better, they get worse because the feelings are compounded, they're not able to resolve the problem. So I'm glad that you pointed that out. Like, that was one thing when I saw that on there that made me cringe. Like, they're trying to get attention. I'm like, they're trying to get, if they're trying to get attention, there's something else that's deeper that needs to be resolved. That's my own thought.
When I think too, when the function of behavior is attention, what's important then is to front load the attention when you can, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're not waiting so that there's there's some sort of episode and then the attention happens because you have to stop the episode, right? So when we know the function of behavior is attention, we try to front load the attention for other more desirable behaviors, right?
And the attention is also because there's a need. In the case of the student that was tripping or falling, it was his way of sort of being like, stop the show. You know, if I stop here for a second, like it'll just buy me some time, because he had a need. And so we were just thinking like, you know, it was hard. We couldn't see past what the need was until he was able to tell us, but he couldn't tell us. Like just knowing the emotion first helps you get to like, oh, I'm feeling this way. I have a need, you know. I don't even think he always knew something was wrong, right? It's just things don't feel right. So I'm gonna, you know, go flat here on the floor right now or trip over my backpack. But I think that's the case for a lot of students. Sometimes it's just all of a sudden it's too much or things are overwhelming. So I'm gonna do something because I have needs inside. So, and those emotions are the root.
And if we're good, nobody has anything else they want to ask Monica and Susan, then we will go ahead and wrap this up. And again, I am going to throw in the chat just Porto Charity's website and let us know what else you want to hear. Like what other webinars would be useful to you or helpful, because we want to be able to provide content for you to help you on the journey to inclusion, or just even with your typically developing students. Because we find that a lot of these strategies, while we might be coming at them from the lens of inclusion, really apply to everybody. And so it just helps everybody along with their journey. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much. Have a good weekend.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. God bless everyone the rest of the school year.
Yes.
Okay.
Stay
Bye.
strong.
Yeah, just get there.
Thank you all.